You know, not too long ago, I was saying we can probably just count down until the announced cancellation of this project, but guess it's happening. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, one of several trailers to premiere today. I'm doing this one later in the day than when I did Alita Battle Angel. I try not to do more than one video in a day because I don't like flooding people's feeds, but I also need to try and get to these things in a timely manner. Jessica Jones Season 2, I'm gonna do that tomorrow. But for right now, this Spider-Man, the Miles Morales version, which I'm glad is coming to the screen in some form. I like Miles Morales. I think that's an interesting take on it. Into the Spider-Verse, that's fairly telling and surprising in a lot of ways. It's not something that I would have thought they would have gone with, although I suppose in some ways it's their, I don't want to say way to placate, but it's a way to sort of deal with the fact that they aren't giving people Peter Parker, is to in some way still acknowledge, hey, he's out there somewhere in the Spider-Verse. That might be part of the thought process. I like to think there's probably more narrative meat to doing Spider-Verse this way than there is anything else. I'll talk about some of the narrative possibilities, implications, whatever, in a minute. I think the thing I'm trying to figure out my feelings on is the animation style. Now, the art style, the actual sort of look that we get, which we don't see much of, it's mostly exteriors of a city at night, which looks to be done fairly realistically, and Miles himself, which we see mostly in the outfit, which looks good. But the movement is weird. This is computer graphics, but it's like they've animated it trying to make it look like a Leica Studios production. The folks who did Kubo and the Two Strings and Paranorman, it's like they're animating it trying to make it look like it's stop action, but it's not, which is weird. It's weird to me even when Aardman Studios does that with their computer graphics things. But I kind of let them get away with it because it's in the art style that they did in stop motion claymation first, so I'm kind of like, fine, but it always just strikes me as weird when you go computer graphics and deliberately try and make it look like it was done with a different technique. And it goes beyond just an artistic style. Like, if that's how you want it to look, why didn't you just animate it in that technique? I mean, you know, sometimes it's a practical thing. There's a reason the Lego movie was done in a computer instead of actually moving the Lego pieces. I get that. But at the same time, like, there are full-length feature films using this technique that look great. If you want it to look like this, just do it that way. I don't know. It's odd. And maybe I could get used to it. And I mean, if it works and it is something I could get used to, it's a way to make the thing stand out, be a little more distinctive, because, I mean, CGI animation can start to feel a bit samey, if not for the specific artistic flourishes of any given director, studio, what have you. So, you know, I can appreciate the theory, I think, but it just strikes me as a really weird choice. So story, obviously this is a teaser, we get very little of this. I want to say I wonder how many people are going to be disappointed, because I know there are a lot of people, well, not a lot of people who comment on my videos have been voicing some degree of desire to see the Spider-Verse done in Sony's films. And that's something I don't have a particularly strong feeling on one way or the other. I do like Spider-Man. I like Peter Parker. I like a lot of the variants. I like Miles Morales. I like Miguel O'Hara. I like these variant versions, but the actual Spider-Verse story wasn't something I ever really read, and not something that I particularly wanted to get into. It just seemed this big sprawling thing, and it kind of gave me like trauma flashbacks to the Clone Saga, and it's just a premise that makes me nervous. Again, I haven't read it. Maybe it works. But I have to wonder if they're burning off Spider-Verse here, if in some ways that's a statement to say, look, we're not doing this in the live-action movies. If you want it, here you go. That being said, I would be impressed if they were so ballsy as to have it imply that the Spider-Verse is one of the alternate universes, is the ones we've already seen. Like, if we had versions of Spider-Man voiced by, say, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and get Tom Holland in there and have them as alternate versions, basically implying, like, yes, this could spill up. Like, that would take some cojones to do that, because it would imply possibly that Miles Morales could escape from an animation world into the real world if they really wanted to go that direction. I seriously doubt there's any plans to do that. It would be interesting, and it would be gutsy, but other than that, Spider-Verse, again, sort of strikes me as probably something to employ as a way to ease people into Miles Morales a little bit. It's a very open admission, like very upfront in the teaser. Peter Parker in this universe is dead. We see the gravestone, and that this is not the only Spider-Man. There are others out there. So basically, without giving you all of Miles Morales' backstory, it lays out in just a trailer, a teaser trailer at that. Look, folks, it's okay if the only Spider-Man you know is Peter Parker and you aren't familiar with this guy. That's fine. He is a different version. That's actually pretty smart as far as these things go, because Miles Morales is pretty well loved by the comic book readers, but I mean, to the general public at large, and I keep saying we need the mainstream audience to come to these movies, otherwise they don't make enough money for these things to keep being made. They know Spider-Man as Peter Parker. And that's pretty much it. So to lay out in some degree and make it clear that this is an alternate version, you're not crazy and we're not changing things on you. There is a Peter Parker out there, but this is just something else. That's a pretty smart way to present it. So for something that's only a little over a minute, this does a pretty snappy little job at sort of setting up the premise, largely just based on the title alone, but sort of getting that out there. Again, my main thing is, well, two main things. It's a story that, you get in parallel dimensions, and I've talked about, multiverse sort of stuff. Multiverse narratives aren't, it's not that they never work. They're not really my thing, because I've seen them go off the rails more often than not, because often the complications that they add are greater than whatever narrative value they actually bring. But so I'm iffy about that in the first place. Could work though. But the animation style, I do have to get used to that, because like I said, it's not bad necessarily, but I can't quite wrap my head around it yet. So we'll see if that eases off. So this will probably be a short one. I did have thoughts I wanted to get out there, but they're not especially deep, because, I mean, there isn't all that much to read into this. It's too short. But that's my thought on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. What are your thoughts on this thing? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast. That's available on iTunes and Stitcher. Apple Podcasts. They don't call it iTunes anymore. Apple Podcasts and Stitcher Radio. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast. That's a presentation of the Fire and Water Podcast Network, fireandwaterpodcast.com. And until next time, this council is adjourned.